Hello and welcome to the world of chess. My name is Jack Reeve, and I've been playing and loving the game of chess ever since I was a little kid. And today, I'm going to be teaching and giving you all the tools you need to learn and navigate chess as a beginner. I'm covering 5 major concepts that I've picked out. They're right here. We'll talk about the board and the setup, and obviously all the pieces and how they move, and how many points they're worth. Then, we'll talk about their interactions. That means what pieces have what vision, attacking threats, and responses to threats. This all flows into number 3, which is checks and checkmate. That's specifically talking about the king, because checkmate is the goal of the game. In the 4th category, I will show you some basic opening ideas, including how to start a game with white and black, and certain traps to avoid falling into. The middle game will include tactics and strategy, the 2 major branches, a little discussion about endgames, and last but not least, what are the 2 most important endgames for beginners to know. Alright, sounds good? Let's go. First things first, a chessboard is an 8x8 square which has files, which are the A file, the B file, the C file, and so on. They also have ranks, the first rank, the second rank, and so on and so forth. They're basically just big boards with coordinates. As you can see here, we have A1, B1, and so on. White starts on 1 and 2. And if you don't have those coordinates, the bottom right-hand corner should be a light square. Okay, each side is 8 pawns. They go on the 2nd and 7th rank respectively. Then, in the back rank of pieces, you can put the rooks or the castle-like structures in the corners, followed by the knights/horses, whatever you want to call them. The bishops, or the ones with the pointed hats, go next. And in the middle, you've got the royalty, the king and the queen. The easiest way to remember how to put a king and a queen on a board is that the white queen likes to have a white dress with white shoes. She likes to stand on the same color square. The black queen likes a black dress with black shoes. So the black queen will stand in a dark square and the white queen will stand on a light square. The kings will obviously stand adjacent. You can also remember that the kings go on the E file and the queens are on the D file. Now, this is a lot of pieces. So what I'm going to do when I'm teaching you about piece movements is I'm going to cut back a lot, while still hopefully giving you all the information that you need as a beginner. Let's start with this position. Let's say in this position you're playing with the white pieces, where you're currently up 35 points of material. Let's start with the pawns. Pawns are worth 1 point. They can only move forward. They do not move backwards. On their first move, pawns can go up 2 in one go, like this. However, after that, they can only move forward 1 square at a time. If a pawn makes it all the way to the end of the board, you can promote it to a queen, a rook, a bishop, or a knight. Even if you already have the 2, let's say, knights that you start out with, you can still have a 3rd one. One thing about pawns is the way that they capture is not actually forward, it's diagonally 1 square. So for example, in this position, the white pawn would capture the black pawn like this. That would be a capture of a pawn. A bonus rule about pawns that I think you should know is called en passant. This is a special rule which I didn't invent, so please don't hate me, but it looks something like a software glitch, and it goes like this. If an enemy pawn moves 2 squares, and stands side by side with your pawn, you can take that pawn via something called en passant, only on this move. If you wait 1 turn, you can't do it, and it looks like this. Now, let's move on to the knights and bishops together, because they are called the minor pieces, and are each worth 3 points. Bishops are very simple. They can go forward and backward diagonally on their own color. So a light square bishop would be able to move like this. A dark square bishop, in this case, would be able to go all the way down here if it could. So it can go to any of these squares. It can go 1 square, 3 squares, whatever. Turning to knights, knights are easily the most unique pieces. They move in little L's, so that would mean up 2 over 1, or up 1 over 2. They can also go back if they need to. So what does this look like? Well, that looks like this. 1-2 turn, 1-2 turn, 1-2 turn, or 1-2 turn. And the cool thing about knights is they can also jump over other pieces. So this knight doesn't have to ask permission. It can just directly move to this square with no issues. Now, of course, you can't take your own pieces, so don't try to do that, but it could go 2 and 1. Obviously, knights are a little slower, right? It would take a much longer time for them to get to the other side of the board compared to bishops. Now, turning over to rooks and queens, they're actually quite simple. No more fancy L's. Rooks are worth 5 points, and they can go up, down, left, right, in the horizontal or vertical direction. They can cover as much distance as they want. So like this. Queens are like rooks and bishops combined. Queens are worth 9 points and they can go all the way here, 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 all the way this way, and this way. Whatever one of those squares that the queen chooses to go to, it can go to. You could say it's superpowered. You want to keep the queen. It's your most powerful attacking piece, but it shouldn't be doing damage early because you would be fighting against a fully loaded position. Last but not least, we have the kings. Kings are like queens, except they're kind of not at all. They can go any direction they want, but by only one square at a time. So a queen can go as much as it wants, and a king can only move one. One more bonus rule for you is castling. It might confuse you a little bit, but castling is a move in chess where you move two pieces at the same time. It's your rook and your king. And this is what it looks like. Let's say in this kind of position, it's white's move, and the king can go 2, and the rook can hop over right next to it. You can obviously only do that when the king and rook can see each other. One more thing about this move is that you can only do it as long as you haven't moved the king or the rook that you're trying to castle. You will learn later in the opening section why castling is important. It's an important move because it gets the king out of the middle. For now, don't be confused. If you're confused, it's all okay. All things will be explained later. Now, let's talk a little bit about how the pieces interact with each other on the chessboard. The way that I want you to think about this is by seeing the vision of a piece. Let's start with the queen. This queen sees all the way down here, but it's all empty squares. The board is split into emptiness, empty squares and physical pieces. Okay, so first things first. This queen sees this pawn. Who else sees the pawn for black? Not for white, but for black. You look around. The rook sees the pawn. So taking this pawn would be a terrible move, because the rook would respond with a capture. That's a capture of a pawn. That's what that's called. Taking a pawn, capturing a pawn. The rook would take back. We lose 9 points in that trade. That's how I want you to think about it. We get 1. 1 for 9 is not a good trade. What else can we see? Well, our bishop can see this knight. Who else? This bishop sees this knight. The bishops don't see each other because the knight is in the way. So, if white in this position plays the move bishop takes knight, and bishop takes bishop, that's a fair trade. That's 3 for 3. That's not such a bad deal. That's how I want you to think about it. When you're first starting out, 3 for 3 is fine. That's more than okay. Bonus question. What does this bishop see? Now, you can see here, it's able to see the rook in the corner. This would be considered a bad trade because losing 5 points in return for 3 wouldn't be a good trade, unless you get more than that in return, or close, like 4. Now, our rook here defends that. That's what's called defense. Same way that that rook is protecting that pawn or defending that pawn. We're defending, but that's not a good trade. So in this position, let's move this rook here for example. On this square, look who we can see. And just for reference, this queen cannot come down and take us. This is because this rook is protecting this rook. Now, think about this. What if, let's say, black flees a move? Queen f6. The queen sees this knight. Is it attacking the knight? No, it's not, because we're protecting it. That would not be a good decision for black to take. And one more thing. Let's say, in this position, black plays this move. Can we capture that bishop? That bishop is trying to win a queen, and many beginners would panic and move, let's say, to this square. But hold on a second. Can't we just take? Is that protected by anything? No. That's how I want you to start thinking about the game as you play it. Is anything protecting that? Am I attacking it? The point value system. Okay, this queen is not attacking this pawn because that's protected. But if no one was protecting that pawn, then it would be capturable. Hopefully that kind of begins to cultivate the thought process of how pieces interact in a chess game. One thing hidden in all of this is the fact that white can play a move queen c4, and that hits the king. That is called check. This part will cover just checks and checkmate. So we'll move ahead to this position. Here, it's white's move. White has a million different ways to attack this king. A check is an attack on the king. It threatens to capture the king. In chess, there is no capturing the king. The king has to escape from danger. So for example, let's say the white queen goes here. Check. Well, the king can just slide out of danger. Otherwise, we would just take the king. Now, let's go on to this position. This position's a little bit different. Let's say it's black's move here. Black's move, not white's move. We give a check. But if it's black's move, can black move legally? No, because black cannot put the king in danger. That is not allowed. Moving on to something a little different, in this position, it's black's move. Is black in check? Is the queen threatening the king right now? To take it? No, because the queen doesn't actually see the king. The queen does not see the king. This is called stalemate. Stalemate is when one side has no legal moves, but is not in check. The king is not in danger. That is a draw. Not a win for one side, but a draw, a tie. You say, Jack, that's stupid. What if I'm up 37,000 points of material, and I accidentally stalemate? Well, tough luck. It's a draw. Alright, let's move on to something a little bit different. You know that checkmate can happen at the start of the game, right? Well, the fastest checkmate known to man is the two-move checkmate, or the fool's mate, and it essentially goes like this. On the second move, black can play queen here if white starts out with pawn to f3 and pawn to g4, and now you're in check, and check is unavoidable. You don't always have to move your king when you're in check. You can also block the check if it's possible. You can also capture whatever is attacking your king. But in this particular case, you can't. This is checkmate. Now, I promised you that we would be looking at openings, and we're going to do that now. How do you start the game of chess? Let's go. In the beginning of the game, you want to take control of the center of the board. This is this area, for advanced beginners. A little rectangle. The best way to do that is to put pawns in the center. So that might mean something like e4 or d4. Both are okay. Alright, just for instructive purposes, I'm going to do nothing with black in this position. I'm just going to move the knight back and forth to give us the most perfect position possible as white. If you can put a second pawn in the center, you should do that, without it getting captured. If you can do that, make sure you do it. Okay, I'm going to continue doing things over here. Next, I'm going to bring out the knights, again to the center of the board. This is better because from here, they can control more squares. 2 knights, that's usually the best way you can go if you can. The bishops will go next, and one thing you have to remember is that bishops can go anywhere on open diagonals. An important thing to note in the opening is that you want to give everyone a turn before you start repeating moves. You don't want to move the same piece 4 or 5 times in the opening. That's not how chess works. So again, black is just doing goofy stuff here, but I'll show you a legitimate game after this. Now, I'll put the second bishop out, as you don't want to make it feel left out. Remember that castling rule? I'm going to play that next. Get the king out of the center of the board. 2 squares with the king, and the rook will jump right over and be adjacent. I want you to remember how to do this if you try it at home, because on a computer, you can just drag your mouse or finger over here and it'll happen, but over the board, you have to know how to do it. Then, after you castle, you can bring the queen up and connect the rooks. Now, here's the problem. If you have a strong opponent, and they just do the same thing as you in the opening, which is probably what will happen, you can't quite just put 2 pawns in the center because they'll take. And it's not a good idea to bring your queen out very early, because the queen would just be attacked. Black just has too much going on. Both sides have too many pieces to bring in their most powerful piece. Your most powerful piece will be taken. Everything in this position is protected very well. So, if they play e5, you can delay this move for now. You don't always have to go 2 squares with a pawn in the opening. You can still get the knight out, attacking this pawn. Let's say they go knight c6. This is very classical. They defend. Now, bishop to c6, or the second knight. Bishop to c4 would be another way, castling, knight out, and so on. The difficult thing about openings is that when you're first learning, you're very tentative. You're thinking about your own moves. I've got to get all these pieces to the right squares. I better not lose any pieces. And also, beginners do all sorts of wild stuff in the opening. They don't always follow the rules. I will teach you the form of checkmate momentarily. So, if your opponent is out here doing things like bringing the queen out early, you're like, wait, can I just take that? Yes. In this position, of course you can. A free queen is very good, even if it's not entirely free. Take a queen if you can in the beginning of the game. Be vigilant. You're already in battle. It's not just about positioning. In the beginning of the game, your pieces are coming out, and they're fighting for squares. As much as they are, they're also targeting the opponent's pieces. So, as soon as move 1, already be vigilant. What can you capture? What's a fair trade? What's a free piece? What's hanging material? And so on. There are certain openings that you can look up. The biggest difference between openings in chess are openings that are called theoretical and openings that are called setups. Setup openings, for example, like the London system, with the white pieces, you can play d4, and then you can get the bishop out, and you kind of play the same way every time. With the king's pawn opening, however, you can't really predict what's going to happen. This is because when you play the king's pawn, there are a lot more different ways that black can play. I know it doesn't seem like it if you're just starting out, but black can play the French defense, the king's pawn, the Sicilian defense, and even the Caro-Kann defense. So you have to know what to do in a lot of different positions, and add your knowledge incrementally. Something you have to be careful about with black are the early queen attacks, and in particular, something called the scholar's mate. If you're not careful with the black pieces, you'll immediately misunderstand what this move is all about. White wants to play bishop c4 and checkmate you. That would look something like this. Bishop c4, queen h5. Why does this work? Well, this is the only square near the king which is only protected by the king, which means if white is able to land the queen on f7 or f2, if you're playing with black, and the queen is protected by the bishop, it's mate. You lose. After 4 moves, you're already done. Game is over. So, how do you avoid this from happening? Every beginner has fallen for this at some point. Something on f7. Well, let's say you played e4, e5, and they play queen h5. First things first, this is not an attack here. It is an attack on this pawn, however, so don't go g6, because they'll just take it, and it will be a double attack on your king and rook. This is a very common trap. What I recommend, if you play pawn e5, is to always develop your queen's knight next. Whatever white plays, unless of course, white offers you a pawn to capture on this side of the board. That's why you put the pawn there, is to capture. So bring out the queen's knight, that defends the pawn, and if they go to mate you, make sure they can't do this. Defend it, with the queen for example. Now you can block because your knight protects your central pawn, okay? There's a lot of different ways not to fall into this so fast. At the same time, if they, bring out their bishop on the second move, then you can also play knight f6. Now, the queen cannot go here because you're not covering that. These are little tricks to avoid losing very easily. Otherwise, a standard game of chess might look something like this. This is what a lot of beginner games look like. And this will flow into something called the middle game, which is the ocean in which many chess players try to swim, but it's not simple to do. The middle game is split into 2 different things, strategic play and tactical play. Beginners' games are decided 95% of the time with tactics. I will give you a very simple example of what a tactic is. A tactic is a forcing move, or a sequence of them, that guarantees the gain of material. So look at the position that you have in front of you. How do you get this knight with the king? That would be a 3-step process. 1, 2, 3. That's a bit more strategic in nature. In positions with many pieces on the board, strategic play takes 2 or 3 moves. Oftentimes, it means rerouting a piece to the other side of the board to make it more active, gaining a very good control of a square. Tactics are immediate. They're the most forcing moves in the game. They make your opponent react. So for example, there's something called a double attack, or a fork. The queen can go here, attacking the king and the knight. That would guarantee that you win the knight. Guaranteed because the king has to move, and then you would take the knight. There's another way to do this, and that would be going here. This is because this is a pin. A pin is a diagonal or vertical or horizontal attack on a piece that can't move. It just can't move. This knight cannot move because we would win the king. And by the way, if it was black's move in this position, black can fork or double attack the queen and the king themselves. Tactics are so important in chess. You should always do as many of them as possible. Chess is so much about pattern recognition and puzzle solving because you don't need to reinvent the wheel when you play. Alright, As we move into endgames are a series of positions towards the end, obviously, of a chess game, which you should know how to do. So for example, king and one pawn versus endgames. That's something that without any knowledge, you will not be able to figure out on yourself. That's something that you can pick up and learn. I'm not going to go into this that much, however, because as a beginner, I feel like it's not something that's very important for you to know. Something I will go over, however, is ladder checkmate in the endgame. Ladder checkmates can be executed when you have a queen and another queen, or a queen and a rook, or even two rooks. Let's go to this position, where you have two queens, one of them having just promoted from a pawn. Ladder checkmates are when you use both your pieces to cut the king off laterally and walk it to the other side of the board. So for example, that might look something like this. Queen b5 cuts the king off laterally, and now your queens alternate which row they're going to control. You just do this until the king no longer has any squares to move to. Switching over a little bit, the easiest way to checkmate with just a queen and a king is what's called knight opposition. Well, what does that mean? That means, if this piece was a knight, it would be attacking the king. Now, you copy everything black does. If black moves one square to the left, you move one square to the left. If black moves one square diagonally backwards, you do the same thing. You do this until you get the king to one of the back rows. So like I said, one square this way, one square this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. Oh look, the king's on the back row now. Now it's time to bring your king. So for example, here, 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 here. The king will prevent the enemy king from escaping. Here, the king cannot put itself in danger, obviously, with our king there, because we would capture it. So for example, now we can deliver either this checkmate or this checkmate, which I like to call in your face. This is a check, and the king is protecting the queen. Otherwise, if our king was back here, the king can just take. The king can capture things for free, of course. But in this case, the king would be defending the queen, making it mate. Alright, that's basically everything that I have for you today regarding the game of chess. Remember, chess is a game that takes countless of hours of practice and hundreds of games to get good at. You can't just become the best of the best overnight. Remember that. If you don't get it immediately, no worries. No chess player ever does. Chess is a game of endurance and memorization. Continue working hard and you'll be rewarded.